Hello everybody, my name is Kyle and welcome back to another video. Today in this one I'll be doing another tier list video, and in this one I'll be doing it on meta decks post Age of Overlord. Age of Overlord is now officially legal in the TCG, and we have its first weekend of results thanks to YCS Indianapolis. I'll put it somewhere on screen right now, like the top 32 cut. I don't know where I'm going to put it, but I'll put it somewhere on screen right now. But as you can clearly see, Rescue was the most represented deck in the room. But after that, it's a pretty diverse format. So pretty nice to see and pretty good to see as a healthy thing for the format. So without further ado, let's get into the tier list, shall we? We'll start off with the tier 1 decks, and obviously the first one we got to start off with is the most represented one that was in top 32, and that was Rescue. Rescue was already like a decent deck before like the Dia Bellstar stuff even came out, and now that the Dia Bellstar stuff is now legal in the TCG, it makes Rescue a very, very good deck. Just being able to get to the Fire Hydrant pretty early on without having to waste like a normal summoner or something like that is always going to be very, very good in this format. And it's also one of those things, Rescue extra deck is always just like, it's kind of just like a toolbox, right? So you have like the firewall stuff where you're setting up like the spell trap negation and stuff like that. That's always very nice to be seeing in this deck, but also just like playing generic cards. Like obviously SP Little Knight was the most represented thing in the extra deck. Everyone and their mother was playing that card in this past weekend, but like SP, like Rescue was like playing two of it just because of how good that card is. And just, again, it's just a very like toolboxy extra deck, and I think that's the reason why Rescue is super good, because you have multiple ways to take it depending on what you want to build your extra deck. But obviously Rescue being able to set 4 spell traps directly from the deck is insane as well. So getting the 4 spell traps directly from deck, but also having the toolbox extra deck just makes it very good in this format. Very, very good to see that this is actually doing stuff now. Next thing up in tier 1, there's really nothing else for me to really put in here at tier 1. As you can see with the top 32, Rescue was the most represented, followed by everything else just closely being together. So I guess we'll just leave that at tier 1 and we'll go to 1.5. Next thing we're going to start off with is tier limit. Now, this was weird because in Europe, the YCS Dortmund was before Age of Overlord. Tier Limit was the most represented deck going into that tournament, but Tier Limit has kind of fallen off. Why is that the case, though? It's kind of because people have kind of just figured out ways to play around it. Like the Rescue stuff, since its extra deck can be very toolboxy, it has ways to make Abyss Dweller, and that's a pretty good reason for this deck to kind of be falling off. Is Dweller kills this deck. Dweller just straight up kills this deck. There's nothing that Tier Limit can do through an Abyss Dweller, so that's kind of unfortunate. But going first, it can set up pretty insane as well. But you think Bystials are in the side deck, you know, decks like something like Rescue can play Shifter as well, which can completely kills Tier Limit as well. So you have to consider there's a lot of counters to this. You know, you could play DD Crow, you could play you know, the Bystials. You can still play Shifter in the deck depending on what deck you're playing. So there's quite a few out to this as well. So even though I still think Tier Limit is still pretty strong, there's a lot more people are figuring out ways to play against it, especially with their extra decks as well. Next thing up in tier 1 here, we are going Purely. Purely again was the second most represented deck in the top 32. Not surprising, again, a lot of people were testing with like the Ken, the Warrior Dragon and stuff like that in this deck before this weekend, but Purely is still Purely. You end on a Noir, there's not really that much stuff that's going to out the Noir in this format, especially if you're not prepared for this. Maybe you're going into this format trying to prepare for like Tier or Rescue, then all of a sudden you don't really have a great out to the Purely Noir, and all of a sudden that Noir is going to win the game. It's also a deck that can play like 15 hand traps for no reason as well, so it's always something that you have to consider going into this format, just because Noir is a beast, so you have to worry about the Noir. But there's also counters to this deck as well, like Book completely kills this deck for some reason as well, which is surprising, but it's still a very decent deck that you do have to be watching out for. Next thing up on 1.5 is Unchained. Unchained has fallen off, which is not a surprise to me because I have been playing Unchained for like the past month or like 2 months. Now, it's a decent deck, but I felt like going into this format, people figured out things to play against it, like the Dweller, like for tier. For some reason, Dweller also kills the Unchained matchup as well. So Dweller was a problem for that. Things like its end board wasn't that great to begin with, the just ending on like the Soul Rage plus the DDD High King Caesar. It was like okay, it still felt like you can break through that, like it was no problem. The deck can still very much go second, but I feel like people just have figured out how to play against this deck. They know exactly where to hand trap now. I don't know, I feel like it's now been in the format long enough that people know exactly how to play against Unchained. So I felt like that Unchained just got a little bit weaker going into this format. Asshole has like rough matchups, like the tier limit matchup is somewhat rough for the Unchained. If they can out the DDD guy, then tier limit can pretty much do their plays and stuff like that. And like, you do have to worry about that as well. But Unchained is still a decent deck, all things considered. Anything else in 1.5 I want to put in here? Looking at it, probably not. I think that's pretty much the 1.5. Let's get into tier 2. This is probably where most of the meta decks are going to go for me. So we're going to start off with Labyrinth. Labyrinth, again, got a top in this top 32. I still don't think Labyrinth is in a very good position right now, just because, again, its power traps like Eradicator and Dimensional Barrier aren't as great like it was in previous formats. It's still a deck that you do have to worry about for, like, I saw some Labyrinth players playing, like, I forgot what that normal trap's called. I think it's the one that basically makes it macro for monsters for that turn as a normal trap. So basically that was their out to like tier limit and stuff like that. But I still feel like it still has a rough matchup against like Unchained, and still has something like the Rescue matchup that has to worry about. So Labyrinth doesn't feel that great right now. It's still a trap deck, and traps are still insane in this format, so it's still something you do have to worry about, but I just don't think it's that great this format. Next thing up in tier 2, Manadeum. There it is. Manadeum actually got a couple tops in this YCS Indianapolis, but I feel like it's still a deck that dies to something like Droll, still dies to something like Nib if you can't properly play around it, and it's going second. Doesn't feel like you can do that much going second. So even though going first uninterrupted, you just win the game, I feel like people are going to be siding in the outs like Droll and Nib, and going second, it just isn't that great of a deck. I just don't think it deserves to be in 1.5 or something like that, so we're going to keep it in tier 2. Next thing up here, where? Sprite got a couple tops in this as well. Sprite is just one of those things, it's like, like it doesn't feel that great anymore, even though the only thing that's really been hit in Sprite is starter, and that's it. That's all and people were playing not the runic version of it, but like Tri-Brigade version. There's a Tri version that did top. Now that was a cool list. I did really enjoy that list, but I feel like, I don't know, Sprite just seems fair now. Like the only unfair thing is like Ibly, and like that's it. That's really the only unfair thing that Sprite does. I feel like everything else, Sprite just feels fair, and it feels like you can break through it. And also like an Imperm on something like the Gigantic also hurts this deck as well. I don't know. This feels okay. I'm going to keep it in tier 2. It did get a couple tops, but I just don't think it's that great. Next thing up here is Rika. Rika got a top in this. So it didn't win, unlike in Europe where it always fucking wins, but it did get a top. I still think Rika is a still very good combo deck. So going first, it sets up so much shit where you just pretty much win the game no matter what the matchup is. It's still a deck that pretty much dies going second. It does not have that great of a going second matchup against pretty much all the matchups above it. So like going second, it is rough. Going first, it does have ways to play through hand traps. It doesn't, you know, play through a shit ton, but you know, you could play through like an Ash or an Imperm or something like that. You know, Droll isn't like, it hits, like Droll is like one of those things they can play around it. Nib is also another thing they can play, or they can play through it. So more like Droll and Nib, they can play through it. So it's a deck that does a lot, but I feel like just going second, it does nothing. And it feels like, depending on the hand, sometimes it's just a bricky hand. So like, that's also a problem with Rika as well. Even though it feels consistent, you do sometimes draw those hands where it's like, I just died one hand trap, unfortunately. But again, I still think it's a decent deck, but we're going to keep it in tier 2. Next thing up here, Vanquished. Vanquished is cool. I still don't think it's that great of a deck, but it did get a top in this as well. The new support is pretty decent for the deck, but I still feel like it's a deck that relies on its non-engine way too much. So, yeah, that's pretty much where I'm going to put it. Like, it's a deck that relies on its non-engine. I think the engine itself isn't that great. Like, sure, like, Raisin is cool, but that's, like, really the only good card besides, you know, the burn card, you know, and that's about it. I don't think Vanquish is really that great, but it still gets top, so I don't know what, you know, maybe I'm wrong, but I just don't think Vanquish is that good of a deck. Next thing up here is the branded stuff. This actually didn't get a top in the YCS, surprisingly. So I think the branded version is worse if you play like pure branded. I feel like it's not that great of a deck anymore. It just kind of fallen off. Bestials exist. Ash to Branded Fusion kind of hurts as well. So I don't think it's really that great of a deck. I think the Chimera one, the Chimera branded stuff, is better because you have multiple ways. So like Ash doesn't hurt as much because they either hurt Ash the Branded Fusion or they Ash the what's the fucker, the swordsman guy. Like, you have ways to play through Ash in this deck. I feel like this is just the better version of brand that you should be playing, but neither of them got top, which is surprising to see. But I still think the Chimera version is better and should be something you should be looking out for. And last thing up for tier 2 is Bestials. The Dragon Link Bestial. The Magnemite and the Chaos Space did do a lot, but I still feel like it's a deck that pretty much is still doing what it used to do before the format, just a little bit more inconsistent, but it didn't get a top. But I still think it's a decent deck. I think it's still better than branded, but again, it didn't have a great showing at YCS Indianapolis, didn't even top, but I still think it's a deck that you have to look out for. Anything else I want to put in tier 2? Just a quick little glance over here. No, there's nothing else I really want to put in tier 2. Next thing up for Rogue, we're putting the Exo Sisters in Rogue. I think I put this in like garbage last time I made a meta deck, but you know what? It's been proving a lot now. So even got top 8 in YCS Indianapolis, and especially in a format where tier limit exists, it's always going to be nice to see Exo Sisters being somewhere in there. But I still don't think it's that great. It's a deck that mainly relies on something like Shifter main deck, right? So it's like, it's okay. It's a decent deck. I like what it's doing, but I just don't think it's as great as these decks up here is doing. So we're going to put it in Rogue. Same thing with Flunder. Flunder is like cool. I like Flunder is decent. I always will. Shifter main deck is always going to be nice. But again, the rescue matchup feels like it's going to be rough, right? It's only there because some like tier limit is in format purely as well. I don't know. It feels okay. It feels okay at best. I don't think Flunder is that great of a deck anymore. It's kind of been falling off as of recent. Amaranthus is a cool combo deck, but I just feel like it just dies to too much. It's a cool one-card combo, but I don't think it ends on enough, and it dies to a lot of hand traps as well. So I just don't think it's that great. Math Mech is sad to see in Rogue, especially because this deck feels like it's still pretty good, but you know, the existence of Bestials and shit like that, you know, pretty much hurts this deck a lot. So we're going to put it in Rogue. Infernoble, again, another cool combo deck, but I just feel like going second, it does nothing, and it does die to something like Droll or Nim as well. So Rogue is where we're going to put it. Drytron, I'm actually going to put like at the top of Rogue. Drytron feels decent. It still dies to things like Droll and Nib, but I don't know. I feel like Drytron is decent, especially since Droplet can be played now in this format. I don't think it's the greatest in the world. I feel like there are just better decks than it, but I think it's still a decent deck overall. We're going to put it in the top of Rogue. What else? I mean, Scareclaw, like the Scareclaw Pier is like okay. We'll put it in Rogue. We'll put it like, yeah, we'll put it there. That's probably fine. Everything else, Sprite Runic is like top of Rogue, I say. I don't think this is a tier 2 deck. I think the Runic engine itself kind of fell off. Even though Runic did top in the top 32, I feel like people know exactly how to play against it. They're playing Cosmics already for something like the Unchained matchup, so that already hurts the Runic matchup as well. I just don't think it's that great. of a deck anymore, or the Runic engine being that great of an engine anymore as well. So we're gonna put it in Rogue. Just looking at everything else, Sword Soul is like okay. I don't think it's the greatest in the world though. Gold Pride is decent as well. It sets up on a lot, but it dies to Droll and Nib. Like, pretty simple as that. Dark World is cool as well with the new Ken the Warrior shit. But it's still just at Rogue at best. I think everything else I'm going to put in garbage. Yeah. So we're going to put Altergeist. We're going to put Man... So Altergeist is cool. It just doesn't do anything anymore. Unfortunately, it just doesn't do that much. Testina, fucking garbage, especially the new support's garbage. I had a lot of people try to defend that in my Testina video. I just don't think this deck's that great. Dynamorphia is cool, but it's kind of garbage. Outrage is just falling off. Labyrinth is just better. Castria as a deck fucking sucks. Like, Fenrir is cool and stuff like that, but the deck itself just, it needs a Rise Heart. If you don't have a Rise Heart, the deck does nothing. So, yeah, garbage. Pendulum has always been garbage. Plunder, I know a lot of people are defenders of Plunder, but I don't see the point. It doesn't feel that great of a deck. Talon Great, even with Gazelle at 3, and even with all the new support, is fucking garbage. Does nothing. The speed, the Synchron deck, I don't know. I feel like Vanadium is, I don't know. This just doesn't feel that great. Striker doesn't do anything. You could probably put Engage to 3 now, and it still wouldn't do anything. Trap Trick is, I don't know. It's a structure deck. I feel like it's just not that great anymore. People just know how to play against it. Virtual World has done nothing ever since fucking VFT got banned. This deck has always been garbage. Dinos is, it's a cool combo deck, but I don't know. It just doesn't feel that great. It sometimes just bricks on its own hand as well. Hero is, it's cool, but I don't think it's that great. And Makonko is, it's Makonko. I feel like if you're going to play Makonko, you have to play like the Infernoble Knight version of it, and the Infernoble Knight version kind of carries. So yeah, that's kind of my tier list video. I kind of skimmed through the end of it just because we had a lot of decks to go through, and I feel like a lot of them just weren't, what was not worth talking about. So yeah, that's my tier list video. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, leave a like and subscribe for more content on the channel, and I hope to see you guys in the next one. Goodbye.